We're going to give it about a minute or so to let some other participants join. Okay, it's 2 minutes after the hour, so we will begin. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country, to all of you. My name is Haresh Malkani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at CESMII. I would like to personally welcome all of you to today's webinar, in which you will actually hear from 4 of our project leaders that have active projects running with the Institute today about their journey around how they came about looking at the problem in smart manufacturing, how they defined it, how did they pick the partners to go with, how did they create a compelling proposal, and all the way up to the point where they actually had a kickoff for their project. So you'll hear that story from them, including what were the lessons learned and both good and bad. They will be joined by 2 of the CESMII headquarters staff that's oriented around program management. So you'll hear their perspective as well. We are recording this webinar. It will be made available shortly after we are done today. Our plan is to go for roughly 90 minutes. That'll give us enough time to go through the materials as well as have a bit of a Q&A. As far as the Q&A is concerned, we are going to leave the chat room as well as the Q&A tab on your Zoom screen open all the while. The microphones will be muted. As we collect those questions, we will spend some time at the end to answer them live here during the session. So that's the plan for today. So again, thanks for joining us. Why don't we just move along here? But let me first begin with a introductory slide that obligatory here. It's the antitrust statement, and you all can read it. I'll give you a minute here to read it, but all participants must sort of follow this guideline here. Please read the statement, and we will move on in about 30 seconds. Okay. All right, so the agenda for today is that I will spend about maybe 5-7 minutes providing an overview of why projects are important to CESMII as an institute and what they bring to the table in terms of our vision and mission. We will follow that by elevator speeches from 4 of our project leaders. They will essentially give us a very quick overview of what each of those 4 projects are. And then we will actually begin with a project journey session in which we will raise some questions and the project leaders will respond to those questions in a dialogue, in a panel style dialogue. That'll be the bulk of the time that we will spend today on. And then towards the end, we will look at all the questions that you would have posted either in the Q&A session or in the chat room. And we will have those answered by everyone on the panel. So what you see on this slide is, on the left-hand side is what we are calling the Institute roadmap. And what you will see there are 4 pillars. Well, actually, they don't look like pillars, but they're pillars. On the right-hand side are the 2 technology pillars. And on the left-hand side are the workforce development and business practices pillars. And the projects that we run through the Institute are very critical in helping us execute our mission. And if you see on the right-hand side of the slide, there are 2 broad types of projects that we execute. One is the roadmap projects, where we actually use a lot of the federal dollars that we have as an institute, matched with our member funds, to create and build technologies, to create and build training content, and essentially do knowledge generation on every element of the roadmap. The bottom side of this, on the right-hand side, is the application projects, where we take technologies and content that is already developed in the Institute, and we apply it, and we validate those concepts, we validate those technologies, and demonstrate them through application projects. So those are the 2 main categories of projects, and the reason they're responsible for driving us forward is that bulk of the work of the Institute actually gets done through the projects. So how do we end up with these projects? The very first step is to identify what the priorities are, or the top priority areas for the Institute. And we take a very broad approach to this. So if you look at the top portion of the slide, the roadmap, which I just showed you in the previous slide, is an important input to that. The roadmap tells us that, look here, here's our long-term vision for this particular element of the roadmap. Here are the short-term steps, and we use that to define what the priority areas. If you look at the left-hand side, we have many conversations that we conduct with our industry partners to figure out what their needs are in smart manufacturing, whether it's technology or workforce development or business practices. We also have affinity groups. So as our members join our institute, we create affinity groups where like-minded or like industry members can talk about what are the common problems, what are the common challenges that they face. And then for the institute to actually help solve those challenges, it's important to get input from those affinity groups. We also have to keep in mind what are our member capabilities at the bottom of the screen. You know, we can execute projects that would utilize the expertise and the capabilities that our members have and the member partners have. On the right-hand side, you see standing committees. We have several standing committees that, you know, give us guidance and critique on how we are functioning on each of our roadmap areas. So there's one for the technical standing committee, there's one platform standing committee, there's an outreach committee, there's a workforce development committee, and business practices committee. So those are our sort of governing bodies in a way to provide the guidance. And then last but not the least is that the Institute has a charge to develop an open collaborative smart manufacturing platform. And that's one of our technology pillars. And that pillar will actually be determined and move forward with the needs that are being fulfilled by some of these projects. So each of these projects will have a way to contribute to that platform. Okay. So these are the different areas in which we kind of keep our eyes open and develop a priority list. And then once that priority list is determined, then the process looks like this, where you, on the left-hand side, you actually begin with a request for proposals. And we define the areas of interest. We sometimes get out a notice of intent. We have, in several cases, white papers that we invite. And then once we have the white papers, we kind of you know, down select them and obtain a concurrence from our DOE sponsors. The next step is actually a fairly detailed and comprehensive step where we invite full proposals from our teams. And those proposals are then evaluated, and then we make formal selections out of those proposals. and then obtain concurrence from our DOE partners. Once we've had that selection done, then we go through a negotiation and finalization step. Negotiations would mean that, based on the reviews, we would fine tune the scope of the budget for each of the projects, and then develop detailed package, documentation that goes to the DOE for final approval, both from a technical standpoint as well as financial standpoint. Once that approval is obtained, then the last step is the contracting. And this is where we create some modifications to our documentation with the DOE. But more importantly, we actually create a contract between CESMII and the project teams. And because we are housed under UCLA, that contracting phase is run by UCLA. And then the lead organization will then issue any sub-recipients agreements from there on. And you'll hear a little bit more about these later on in the discussion. And once that is done, then you have your formal project kickoff. So that's really the high level order in which things take place. So our first round of projects, which was, we're calling them the RFP1 program portfolio, consisted of 10 projects, and you see them listed on the left-hand side. And 4 of those teams are represented today by their project leaders, and those are highlighted in the red squares on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is a picture that we've been using to articulate what portions of the smart manufacturing landscape do these projects actually touch upon. And what we've identified there are just the bulk major areas, the main areas, but that doesn't mean that the other areas are not covered in the projects. In fact, most of the projects have touch points across the whole diagram over there. And you'll see, I guess you'll hear about that in the project descriptions that our leaders will go through in a moment here. That was RFP1, which was actually issued a year and a half ago, and then the projects have been launched since late summer last year. But what we have going on right now are 4 additional RFPs, and they're part of RFP2, but they're coming in 4 different waves. Wave 1 is something that we are already well underway. We have selected the project teams, and the negotiations have been completed. And we are waiting for the final packages, the award packages, to be approved by the DOE. Wave 2 is focused on education and workforce development, and we are in the middle of evaluating the proposals right now, both internally at CESMII as well as the external evaluations. And then today, you should have seen the announcement that we've issued Wave 3 and Wave 4. And these are focused on the SM Innovation Platform and the innovation projects. So again, more details around those will be shared with you in some upcoming webinars in the several days this week and next week. So just to whet your appetite that there are things out there that you can, as a team, respond to. So enough of that. Why don't we move on to the meat of the content here with the 4 project team leaders. And we'll hear from them on their stories and how they got here. So what I'm going to do is just briefly introduce them. We have Niels Anderson, who's the Chief Product Officer from ThinkIQ. ThinkIQ is one of our technology partners and is leading one project. Dr. Tatha Bhattacharya, he's the lead researcher at ArcelorMittal, and he's leading one of the R&D projects that's dealing with development of technologies for steel. Dr. Joe Ciuffi is from Penn State. He's responsible for a workforce development project which uses a bench scale unit that is used for development of curriculum for smart manufacturing. And then we have Mark McGinley, who's leading a project on smart manufacturing of cement out of University of Louisville. And we also have Miguel Corcio and Sean Gottby, who are on my team, but they're essentially the program managers who are responsible to make sure that we are helping the project teams move forward, as well as a ton of sort of process-related documentation, program management activities that need to go on in parallel as we are executing on these projects. So I'll be joined by these wonderful people here in the conversation. And with that, why don't we begin with the first question? So I guess what I would like to do is to have each of the project leaders just maybe spend about 2 or 3 minutes at a high level talking about what the project is. And so if I can call upon Niels first to provide an overview of their project. Niels?
Thank you, Haresh. So our project is inferential modeling for driving out energy waste. It's a very big word, but what we are actually doing is that we are using and extending the CESMII Smart Manufacturing Innovation Platform to improve the ability to understand where energy waste is happening. This is a single platform where we can combine both energy data together with other data, so it's not an energy standalone platform, and it gives us all the benefits of the integrated data. We're using this to get better information about the sensors that are already there, and we also developed software technology that allow us to go in and infer energy usage where there's a lack of sensors. In addition to that, we built an ontology that describes the vocabulary for energy usage in the plant that we implemented this in.
Excellent, thank you, Niels. Okay, Tata? You may be muted, Tata.
All right, there you go. All right, so my name is Tata Bhattacharya. I'm actually leading this roadmap project from ArcelorMittal to produce zero defect slabs in continuous casting. If you look at the flow diagram, to the right of this slide, you can see that the casting is a very important process in the whole steelmaking value chain, which can actually make or break your process and product quality. So this project is actually going to use some of the smart manufacturing methodologies, such as employing a SM platform using AI machine learning to collect and analyze data so that we can actually learn what process conditions create defects or process upsets in the steelmaking process. So we are going to actually look at top 2 KPIs of this process, namely the uptime. We need to make sure that the process is running all the time, and we have the highest productivity possible. And at the same time, we're also going to look at the yield of this process by enhancing the quality and minimizing rejects or defects. Back to you.
Thank you, Tata. Okay, Joe.
Hello. Our project, in collaboration with MIT, is really to develop training materials for CESMII members in the smart manufacturing workspace. It's designed for undergraduate students and current workforce to give both an overview of modern techniques with data-driven sort of decisions in a manufacturing environment. And so we use this mock system, this extrusion system, to chart through those areas and give people a sense, again, of the general overview of how you would do this, and then some deep dives into different techniques. So that in the end, what we can provide to CESMII members is sort of a training bank where not only could you learn a little bit about these topics and understand, well, how can I re-instrument a tool? How can I use that data in a more effective way? But also, we'd hope to have then templates for our members to follow to help them get started and develop those techniques on their process. So that's sort of our goal for this project.
Thank you, Joe. Last but not least, Mark.
Thank you very much, Haresh. What we're involved with, both the University of Louisville and our industry partners at Argos USA, is to take a look at the cement manufacturing industry. And this particular industry is very energy intensive, uses about 5 gigajoules per ton to produce this particular product. It also comprises about 7% of the world's CO2 output. And so it is a critical industry. We use a lot of cement in concrete, one of the most commonly used materials in construction throughout the world. And so we need to address this. We need to reduce the amount of energy we put into this particular product. And we are looking at applying smart manufacturing techniques, better predictive models, better sensor systems, nonlinear observers, machine learning, and the like into a state-of-the-art control system that will allow better quality product with less energy. And so that's our end goal in here. I'd like to thank my project group there. They're well underway in there, and I'm working with great industry folks on that as well. And it has been a very good process so far, and look forward to chatting with any of you later on in this presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, all of you. All right. So what we'll do now is that we'll pose some questions for our leaders here, and we'll have a dialogue around how they got here, how they began the journey, and how they got here to the point where they actually have an active project going on with that. So let me begin with the first question. So, you know, one of the things that at least I have experienced is that, you know, I was in the manufacturing business for 3 decades, is that, you know, identifying what is it that you're after and what is the problem that you need to solve is often one of the biggest hurdles, because there's a sea of stuff out there. You know, if you're a manufacturer, you got multitude of problems. You got problems in production, quality, you know, efficiency, you name it, right? How do you pick the right problem that you need to solve? So if I could call upon Mark to begin first, in your project for using smart technologies for cement, you narrowed it down to a particular piece, a particular section of your process. How did you identify that problem?
We cheated, quite simply. We had one of our faculty, the director of the Conn Center, has been a member of CESMII for a number of years. And he brought to interested faculty here, he gathered us together, took a look at the first wave RFP that went out there. One of the areas of interest that was generated out of this brainstorming session was cement. And we then looked at cement manufacture, where the state of the art was in the industry. We have the good fortune of locally having 3 cement plants within a 10-minute drive from the university. So we went and chatted with them. A number of our students are actually working in the production at those plants, either managers or assistant managers and the like. And through those discussions, we were able to identify what are they doing, at least locally in the US, and then looking, turning a number of the graduate students loose, looking at where the state of the art was. And we were able to, looking at that, generate a number of issues that we believed that we could address, problems to be solved. We ran them by our industry partners, and it's really critical. Anyone who's going to address that, you got to work hand in hand with the industry, because they're the ones who know what the problems are. They may not know the solution, but they know what the issues are. And second, they're the ones that need to implement it. So in each case, we tried to go along all the way there and use our industry focus to create the problems, to go through and then look at solutions there. And then the whole thing just kind of fell in from that.
Outstanding. So Niels, in your world, right, you come from a technology provider side of things.
Yeah.
How did you identify the problem?
We started very broadly because, as you say, we are a technology provider and very much focused on information and analysis of information in order to improve processes. So we actually went all the way back to the CESMII Charter and said, okay, what is it that CESMII is trying to achieve here? What are some of the opportunities we have in that space? And we created actually a very long list that we then refined and grouped and put together and made sure it mapped into CESMII's goal. And then we took that list and we then said that one of the critical elements here for success is that we are getting an industry partner on board, getting the right partners on board. And we had worked very closely with General Mills, being a very good partner on multiple CESMII projects. And we went to them and said, of this list, which ones are the ones that will actually make a difference for you? And they went in and they analyzed that we had presence and the ability to go in and improve and reduce energy waste without necessarily having to go in and invest in a large amount of new meters came up very, very important. And they also had existing projects going on where they wanted to do artificial intelligence and machine learning. And this fit very well into that process itself. So another thing that I found was very important when it came to the problem identification and refinement of it was really the CESMII process itself, the type of questions in a template that really helped us shape and refine what we're going to deliver.
Excellent. Thank you. So shifting gears a little bit in terms of the flavor, Joe, your world is all about education and training. How did you identify the problem in your case?
Well, our path was, as you've just heard, also collaborative in nature. So our campus, which is situated just outside of Pittsburgh, we had started engaging our local manufacturers. You know, we run an automation and robotics program, and through our integration into the community, we really started to identify a disconnect in the manufacturing that we see, and then the modern use of digitalization and data-driven informatics in that world. And we were trying to wrap our head around it, and our chancellor even had a big part in this. And at the time of this RFP, Arconic, who had been working with MRT, came to us with this opportunity to work with CESMII, and it really kind of fell into place. That's exactly what we were looking for, to help sort of corral our thinking and redefine the problem very narrowly, because it seemed like so much to tackle to try to help our local small and medium manufacturers. So the partnering and the discussions very quickly came together and corralled around this problem. So we appreciate that.
Excellent. And steel, well, my background has been in aluminum for many, many years. I mean, for somebody to come to me and say, okay, pick a problem to solve, I'd be lost. How did you do it, Tata?
Yeah, so I think, as you said, in manufacturing, there are, a lot of problems, gaps, challenges that are still waiting to be solved. So, there's a lot of, plenty of problems, and we have been working from R&D projects and, and also in plant, continuous improvement projects for a long time. So, it's both kind of, easy and, difficult, I would say, if you look at it in various, ways. So from R&D side, we kind of know, that we have a, portfolio of R&D projects. Let's say we are talking about the process side of things. And we know that, what are the top challenges that we haven't been able to solve for a long time. So we kind of have a pretty good idea about, what are the top things that we need to kind of, chase and go after. When you go to plant, of course, in plant, things actually, kind of change from time to time. We have short-term kind of, objectives for certain projects in the plan, and we also have kind of, long-term, longer-term things that where R&D or maybe our partners from academia, they can actually pitch in to kind of help, right? So we had a kind of mixed bag of things that we had to look at. So very early on, I think we joined the SMLC, a long time ago, and we had these discussions of test bed projects and all kinds of stuff 2.5 years ago. So we interfaced with our, business units to kind of identify or make a laundry list of, business cases, high value, top value business cases and then we came up with this casting issues, problems that we face every day in terms of quality and then productivity. So that was kind of the top thing actually that kind of floated out of those brainstorming sessions. And then we went ahead with the casting process. We developed the proposal, and then we had multiple brainstorming sessions, both within R&D and also in the plant, on those business cases to kind of identify the resources and support to move forward with this project. So I would say, from R&D side, identifying those problems was kind of easy, I would say. But again, we had to be aligned with the process needs of the plants and kind of have a balance between all those projects. So.
Great. So, you've got the problem identified, and then the question that comes to your mind is, well, I can solve this problem in multiple ways, right? I could do it on my own as a company. I could work with a known partner and do it. I could join a consortium and then, leverage that. So how, going back to let me start with Niels in this case. How did you end up deciding that this was the right way for General Mills to solve the problem? Or how did General Mills and you together decide that this was the way to do it?
It was a multi-step process. The first thing we did with all the projects that we proposed was to make sure that this was not something that we just would do because of CESMII, but it's something that we believe was a worthwhile project to solve independent of CESMII, but where the CESMII collaboration was a catalyst or an enabler to making it happen. And so that was one element we looked into the project itself. We also found it was very important for us to have real customers, real users that were driving the project forward, so that it didn't just become a technology project in its own right, but that we actually could go in and show that we had meaningful difference. And then along the path, we found it was very important for us as well that CESMII had the smart manufacturing innovation platform focus, the big focus. And the way that actually, we talk about how CESMII helped us here on this path forward, the process in CESMII that kept asking, what is your commercialization process? How are you going to not just make this a single project, but something that can be taken out and then repeated across many manufacturing plants across the United States? And then, of course, for the path to solve, while it was not the most critical, but it was definitely very important, is the CESMII funding and the ability that CESMII could go in and help us put additional resources on this in a way that neither ThinkIQ nor General Mills could have done in our own right. And in the end, it really wasn't an option for us to do this just by ourselves. We needed CESMII and we needed General Mills to do it.
Great. How about you, Joe, from an educational and training standpoint? I mean, there are, this whole topic about how to train the workforce and train, the talent pipeline and all that stuff. I mean, there's just so many ways to do it. How did you land on this particular method?
Well, there is, and especially in education, there's a lot of pieces of pie to tackle at once. So I think focusing on the project really helped narrow our focus, and deciding which approach that sort of followed from our immediate audience and from there. But I think it's almost more important in our case to do this under the auspices of a community of people. Every educator can develop their own materials. Manufacturers, often our industrial partners, have their own little blips and training things here and there. But in manufacturing, we're often so scattered and individualistic, siloed in different platforms and technologies. Frankly, it made so much more sense to be able to develop this with the entire CESMII community, so we can start coalescing around common language, common techniques for our engineers, just that communication together to bring it to more useful for all of us, because it really can be scattered, especially in the educational space. So doing this under one house, one umbrella, and be able to talk to everyone about it is very important to us.
Great. So, the issues that come up in continuous casting of steel, I mean, a company like yours, ArcelorMittal, pretty well known across the world, has the resources to do these kinds of things. How did you end up deciding that this was the right path for you working through CESMII? This is for Tata.
Yep, that's a good question, Haresh. So ArcelorMittal actually has been using digital technologies, for a long time, and we have built solutions that are working at specific lines, sites. But we have generally found it to be very difficult to scale up or roll out those solutions, in a very easy way to multiple plants. Partly because we don't have a kind of a, enterprise-wide kind of, foundational data infrastructure that we can actually reuse for multiple projects. So basically, at the end of the day, when we are going to roll out certain solutions, then it's a new project from scratch again, right? And then so we have been looking for solutions to those kind of problems. So that's a big gap area that we kind of identified in the last few years. So when CESMII came, it's very kind of a natural fit for us because CESMII's vision is to kind of help the manufacturers, especially to make data as the primary most critical asset, and kind of utilize data in a way that can actually help us solve some of the problems that you couldn't solve earlier. So so it's kind of a natural fit for us, I would say.
Great. So flipping back to cement, a company like Argos or any other cement company, I'm sure that the problem that you stated, Mark, in your project is something that others are facing as well. So how did this path evolve for you, or for Argos in particular, to go this way?
There's been a lot of work done in the cement industry in Europe on trying to improve the performance of cement manufacture there. Most companies have an international connection, and so they're somewhat tied into that, but there's no coordinated effort in the industry. They do not play well together, these particular companies, yet they have common problems. And so what we felt was, by looking at the cement industry, what we were providing not only for Argos, but also the cement industry and related industries. One of the things that we were trying to do, and it changed our focus in the development of our project, was to look not just at the cement industry, but look at developing a process that could be applied to cement, to lime, to ceramic manufacture. We even have a teammate member who is big into the plasma and using plasma for production. And these are all high temperature production systems where it's very hard to measure the conditions that have a significant impact on the product quality and the amount of energy used. And so these are all consistent with, and we look to these other industries also to help look at solutions to these common problems across the board. So in that manner, we were able to, I think, hopefully leverage and look outside the industry for the cement industry to what others are doing as well.
Outstanding. Yeah. So, once you kind of determined, what path you've chosen, and you've chosen CESMII to be the path, I think one of the natural questions that may have come to all of you is that, what is the benefit of doing that through CESMII versus any other organization, or doing it on your own? What is the return on investment that you expect out of this relationship? And then also equally important, how does your project benefit CESMII? So let me start with Tata here, and get your perspective on this.
Yeah, I think I would say the topmost benefit of being in CESMII, for us, I think, is to be able to tap into the collective wisdom of this network of individuals, the ecosystem, the organizations, and the technologies that form this whole ecosystem, so that you can tackle this pressing manufacturing challenges and collaborate towards, kind of developing solutions. So that's kind of the benefit that I see, that we see, as part of our journey. In terms of ROI, I would say there are multiple ROIs. If you look at individual, solving a problem, for example, in our plants, increasing the productivity, the quality, gaining energy savings. Those are some of the tangible ROIs, or direct ROIs that we can actually get. But those are some of the things that we have been working on for a long time anyway. But I see, in terms of some kind of intangible ROIs, would be kind of to shorten the time to value, for a lot of our solutions, to roll out those solutions in multiple plants. So right now it takes years to kind of roll out or scale up certain solutions or existing solutions, or maybe something that we build from scratch. But I think with CESMII's help, we can actually cut those times and then create value very quickly. So that would be one of the top ROIs that I think out of this project.
Very good.
I think the other point would be our project kind of specifically touches upon I think the 4 pillars of CESMII's technological areas, namely the platform, sensors, models, and controls. So I think this project kind of can act as a vehicle for CESMII to kind of demonstrate all those capabilities as well. So.
Outstanding. So you mentioned some of the technologies, and I think that there's an emphasis on being able to leverage technologies across your solution set. So flipping the question to Niels, when you coming from a technology organization, trying to do this through an institute like CESMII versus doing it on your own, could you share your perspective on why this partnership is working and important?
Yeah. So first, from the CESMII partnership perspective, CESMII is a very, very important for us, and they are a true partner, and enables us to go in and have the right long-term focus on solving the needs of the benefits, and the benefit the members, which is absolutely critical for us. And if we go in and look at it from an ROI perspective, and like the other previous speakers here as well, I talked about the ROI, not just for us, but the ROI for the whole ecosystem. As we wrote up the proposal here, General Mills came in and said that the benefits to General Mills is $10 million per year if we solve this correctly and roll it out to all their plants. So an enormous amount of savings. If you look at American industry, and now with the increased focus on bringing manufacturing back to the United States, it's absolutely critical that we go in and use all type of energy waste as them, and that we reduce the emissions associated with energy wastes. And we believe it is absolutely critical to go in and do this. And we perceive that we can go and do a 5% energy reduction across most of manufacturing using these type of techniques, with a fairly small investment in meterings, which typically is a cost driver for this. We see also from a CESMII perspective, this year is enhancing the CESMII Smart Manufacturing Innovation Platform, and we are adding additional content and tangible benefits that then again will go to the CESMII members, hopefully then drive the adoption of the platform, and also increase the number of members within CESMII.
Super. So one of the themes that I heard in the conversations that we've had up to this point is around the partnering and teaming. And all of you have strong partners on your teams, and the question then becomes, in some cases it was pretty easy to come up with the partner. In other cases it may not have been. So I just want to get a perspective from 2 of you. Begin with Mark. How did you identify Argos as a partner in this journey? And given that there are other cement manufacturers, how did you end up picking them?
Well, faculty and the other team members on campus, it was pretty easy to get them interested and get the people with the right backgrounds identified. But you're right, the cement industry is a very interesting industry. There's a lot of amalgamation going on worldwide in that industry. I think a significant portion of the overall production is owned by about 4 companies. But there are a smattering of smaller companies throughout the world. It used to be 400 or 500 of them. Now they're much fewer. What we did was look locally first. The problem with the local ones is 2 of them were in the process of being bought out and were not flexible enough to react to the project. They had interest. We moved along quite well with that, but they did put us in touch with other people. And I work at ASTM. I sit on the C9, C12, and C15 committees, and I had a lot of contact across the area. And we had some conversations with the group from Argos USA. They had both the interest, they had same problems as everybody else in the industry, and they had the resources, and this is critical, the resources necessary to engage with them. That doesn't necessarily mean the money, but the willingness to take risk. And that is a significant thing, because everything we do on these projects require risk to be taken by the industry. And you have to be careful and select the group there and the team with that risk in your mind as you go through and plan out the project. It's very important. And they were willing to take the risk for what they perceived a significant return on their investment to being first adopters of this technology. So
that's good to hear. Good to hear. So, flipping in your case, you come from a reputed academic institution. You went out and reached out to an industry to become your partner. In the case of ArcelorMittal, I think it's the other way around, right? You actually went to Purdue and Missouri.
Yep.
Could you share your thoughts on that?
Yep. So in our case, we already had a long-term relationship with our academic partners. For example, Purdue and Missouri, they run industry-led steel manufacturing consortia for a long time, and we are a member of those consortia. So it was kind of very natural and synergistic for us to actually select those partners because we're already doing research projects, individually sponsored research projects, R&D projects with them for a long time. So those are some of the existing partners, but at the same time, we are also looking for new partners to kind of develop new capabilities, bring in those new technologies and kind of infuse those technologies in our projects, in R&D activities, and also kind of advance the skill sets of people who will be involved in those projects from the plant. So it's kind of education and workforce development aspects of those also. So while developing the project scope with our regional manufacturing center at RPI, we found out that RPI can actually bring in new capabilities such as data analytics, AI, ML on the table for our project, because our project actually heavily depends on data-driven methods. So that was kind of actually very good for us while developing and discussing the scope of this project with the regional manufacturing center. So we selected RPI, and we are very, very happy that we are kind of making good progress with them in terms of infusing those some of those latest new technologies on data analytics for our project. So that was kind of our perspective on selection. So.
Excellent. So once you've done this whole process of identifying the problem, deciding to go with CESMII, picking the partners, I think the next step is how do you create a proposal that catches our attention, right? And so again, I want to hear from some of you around how you created a compelling proposal. So Joe, can you give me a sense of how your mind was working on creating this?
Sure. And I having written and reviewed quite a few proposals, I kind of have a set of general rules for writing proposals. There's just two. One, be topical to the RFP, and two, be clear, overly clear. And, you know, being topical to a request for proposal, it is crucial that you read and understand what they're looking for. I think especially in this case, you know, CESMII is set up as an institute. They have those pillars identified. They've used committees to kind of identify the areas they want work done in. This isn't an open call for fundamental research from NSF, right? These are things that we believe are valuable to the community. So, you know, we're all guilty of either as a academic, you know, shoehorning our latest and greatest cutting edge research into a proposal, or from industry, you have a very specific problem you've been working on, you want to get some money to do it, so you also shoehorn it into a proposal. But really take the time to read what they're looking for and either adjust your project or decide what makes sense to submit for. So having that clear vision of the topic in relation to the RFP for me is just critical right off the bat.
Okay.
The second is the idea of clarity. It never hurts to be overly clear. You know, as engineers or workforce, we tend to know our topics well and we throw them down on paper. I know we already said that, it looks fine, but I believe it's important to help the reviewers hit every major point that they're looking for, repeat, clearly identify what you're doing, and try to lay it out as clear as possible. So oftentimes folks focus on the nitty-gritty of the technical arguments, but in some cases, and I think especially with CESMII, it's really about understanding what they're looking for and being clear about it. So that's sort of my general advice in this regards. I mean, just remember that at first cut, every review panel is looking for a way to put your proposal on the bottom, and if you don't hit what they're asking for, it's an easy way to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put one of my team members on the spot here and get the other perspective from the other side of the table. So Miguel, you're director of the technical programs. You have the charge of sort of setting up the RFPs and going through the process of, you know, the white papers and the proposals and the evaluations and, you know, the whole thing, right?
Yes.
Can you share your perspective on what a compelling proposal should look like?
Sure, absolutely. And you know, as I was listening to the team here and going from coming up with a great idea, you know, the right problem to be solved, putting together a very strong team, you know, those are critical elements that has to be reflected in the proposal, obviously. But at the end of the day, you know, proposals are there to compete. And, you know, if you have a strong proposal, it will reflect immediately through the evaluation process that we have and also the internal reviews that we do. For example, in RFP1, we have 41 proposals and only 10 were selected. So you can see that there's a lot of competition there. But when it comes to seeing a compelling proposal, I totally agree with Joe. I mean, it has to align with the RFP. You know, we get great ideas and great proposals and fantastic problems to be solved, but they're not 100% aligned with the CESMII overall vision and strategy. So that kind of disqualifies that. So to me, you know, as I see proposals coming through the system and through the evaluation, a compelling proposal is definitely one that will first align with the RFP 100%. Not only partially, sometimes, you know, there's one or two elements in there. But if the RFP, for example, is about energy reduction, it better be about energy reduction, not something else that eventually will get you there, okay? So a lot of the proposals that we see, sometimes they're great, but the impact is very, very low and indirect. So that's one issue that we see. So a compelling proposal, align 100% with the RFP, make sure you're addressing, you know, the areas of interest clearly. Because that's the other thing. Sometimes we get proposals and we wonder and we scratch our heads, you know, which area are they addressing? You know, it's like, I mean, is it really workforce development or is it something else? You know, so that makes it a little bit difficult for us and for the evaluators to really say, oh, this is a great proposal. Here's your answer to A, B, C, and D, very clearly, you know, stated and in there. And when it comes to your teams, make sure your teams are also very well described in the proposal, like team A will do X, Y, and Z. Team B will tackle this other area. You know, sometimes we just see proposals that said, I have a great team, you know, and, you know, they might be great teams, but it's very unclear on what exactly the role of each team will be. So a compelling proposal has to follow very specific rules, and we try to provide as much information as possible. You know, we have the webinars so people can ask questions. We have templates, we have examples, you know, to facilitate that. So take advantage of that and create that compelling proposal so you can compete, you know, at a higher level when you're submitting a proposal and responding to an RFP.
Excellent. Great perspective, Miguel. So once you've reached that point where, you know, Miguel has kind of, you know, taken his whip out, and, you know, the CESMII team and the evaluators are doing that stuff, and we end up selecting proposals and moving forward, the next step is to actually put a package together that that essentially is the final approval from our sponsors. So the federal government puts in a significant share for your project, and we work with them as partners to make sure that the content of the project and the proposal is lining up 100% with their expectations and our expectations, and it's the right proposal to move forward with. And that involves putting together a package that reflects that. Mm-hmm. Now, this is, you know, the responsibility is shared here. I think the project team members provide most of the information, and then Miguel and his team work with you to put together the package. So Miguel, maybe you and I believe we have Sean Gottby, who's a program manager at CESMII. Why don't you spend a couple of minutes talking about what this is and what's the best way to sort of move forward on this step?
This is a really critical step, and it's a step that a lot of the organizations that have been selected or preliminary selected during the process tend to miss a lot. I have seen, for example, we send the notifications that, you know, these teams have been selected, and then we get into this final contracting. We provide samples and templates, and it seems to me like at this stage, maybe it's my perception, but a lot of the teams that we work with tend to relax at this point. It's like, you know, we got the project, so we don't have to do too much. And unfortunately, this is a really critical step, because if we don't get through the contracting phase, there's no project. And I've seen, you know, even though we ask for the 335s, the SOPOs, and all this other related documentation, sometimes it takes like I don't know, a lot of going back and forth. Hey, don't forget to send me this. Don't forget to send me this. You know, and it becomes more like of struggle trying to finalize the document. So I would recommend, you know, the best practices is you have examples, you know, try to complete those and pay a lot of attention to this phase, because even though you have been selected, you know, at this stage, you're still not 100% selected. Anything could happen at this point. So pay attention to the documents and make sure you correct them and finish them as the expectations that we have from CESMII and the DOE. A good example would be, you know, people tend to miss the little things. Like, you know, they might have the wrong number, the project total cost would be wrong, which is, how can you get the project cost wrong at this stage, you know? Or there might be, you know, missing information. It could be, you know, something that it hasn't been clarified, is never clarified, and we have to go back. So there's a lot of disconnection at this point. So first, I would recommend, you know, pay attention to the documents that have to be provided. The DOE is very clear at this stage. They just follow the checklist, A, B, C, D, and they go down the line. And do we have a 335? Is the 335 complete? Do we have the whole information? Is the budget aligned with the cost share letters? You know, they follow a very strict checklist, and that checklist is available. I mean, we can provide it. So it's not a very difficult step, but it's something that a lot of people tend to relax too much when we get here, and we procrastinate a little bit. I've seen that also, you know, like for example, by the time we select a project and we have the final documents, sometimes it takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we have to go back and check with people, like, can you please submit it to us? And the sooner we get it, you're in the best situation. You know, the projects that get all their contracts done first are the ones that are going to go faster, and they get a lot of attention, they get a lot of support, you know, they get a lot of you know, people, you know, with them. The other ones are by default kind of struggling a little bit, and that also can impact your future projects. You know, sometimes people don't see that, but if we have an issue in a specific project, either on the execution or even on this contractual phase, and the next round of projects, if we get to a situation where we have to select that organization again, we begin to wonder, I mean, are we doing the right thing? Because we struggled before. So pay attention to that. And the fact that these 10 teams were selected, it shows that, you know, they were following the steps, they were following, you know, the recommendations. So it's great. So, but don't underestimate this step. This is really critical, important, and it's sometimes it's a lot of time consuming because you have to go back to your team and request additional information. So
Great.
Sean, do you have anything else to add on this? Maybe I missed something.
No, actually, you covered just about everything on that. One thing that's going to influence also is transitioning to contracting your project team members. That could take some time as well, which essentially impacts your project kickoff. So, so it's very important to essentially fast forward through that process as effectively and efficiently as possible in order to transition to the next stage in your project lifecycle a lot more effective.
Great. So talking about kickoffs, you know, I think we have 4 very different types and flavors of projects that that are represented here today. I just wanted to see if maybe Mark, maybe you can begin and tell us how you approached the kickoff process for your project.
Yeah, actually, I think we were one of the first ones to get underway. What we found is, you know, our critical focus was to get the team together, to get the trust that is necessary built as quickly as we can. There was a fairly significant delay from when we first got notification to when we started. So we had to get the momentum back in the project and move that forward. So that was another focus of it. And then we wanted to make sure, ultimately, we've got to go down to a plant and get them to adopt the technology that we developed. And plant managers tend to be extremely resistant to that level of risk. And so we have to build a level of trust with them. So what we did was try to get everybody together, everybody understand what the short-term and long-term goals of the projects were, understood what the people's responsibilities were for each of the tasks and critical tasks that we identified in the project schedule, and then make sure everybody understood who to go to if they had problems and when they had problems with the system. And you know, that is critical, getting things moving quickly. We tried to set very aggressive goals at the beginning to get the momentum back into the project, and we were quite successful with that. And we had some issues where we had to do some things. One of the things we built in is one of our partners, Argos, their research arm is in Colombia, down in South America, just outside of Medellin. And so they had to come up and interact with us there. And so they took the time to come up. We then took a group of the faculty down to the Argos plant, which is down just outside of Birmingham, Alabama, so that we could get everybody in the production facility that we're ultimately going to incorporate into what we're doing, comfortable with everybody, get all the questions answered. For all the people that weren't involved in the development of the proposal, it was done at a much higher level, but we needed to get these people on board and understand what's going on. And we've kept that up using a virtual meeting at least 2 to 3 times a week. We interact with the production facility people, and we actually got one of their group now is doing a PhD on our campus, so we stole him. And he got so enthusiastic about the project, he decided, well, I think it's time I did my PhD. He, by the way, is at Purdue, did his master's there, and he's now not too far away in Louisville, working on his PhD. So
That's
the
great.
critical thing is focusing on team and getting the team enthusiastic and moving.
That's great. That's great. Well, I mean, you know, I think Sean on our side has been instrumental in sort of keeping tabs on all of these 10 projects and, you know, how they're being kicked off and all that stuff. So Sean, do you want to share some of your thoughts on how that process went and what are the key things that you would highlight?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, we essentially follow, or we do follow, a structured approach to kicking the projects off. And again, not only just sharing critical project information, being shared by the actual project lead organization and their team with regard to the scope of work, the timeline, and their project management practice and approach, which would vary depending on the nature of the project, whether it's a software development or is a product development, which again, they may use 2 different methodologies for managing the project. But also just ensure that there is an alignment between CESMII's program practice management and individual project management. We are growing as an organization. We're developing our program management office. We are establishing standards with regard to way not only our internal projects are managed, but also our program portfolio opportunities, initiatives are being delivered. And through that engagement, it's been very effective to interact with project leads and establish the expectations and the guidelines with regard to how the program management practices in CESMII will need to be aligned with project management practices on the project leads organization.
Very good, very good. And just so that everybody knows here on the call that, you know, we, you know, Miguel and Sean are there for helping you as you're doing these kinds of things, whether it's the preparation of the materials, whether, you know, you have questions around the documentation that's required, whether you have questions around, you know, once you have the project kickoff schedule, what are the other things that you need to be aware of in terms of the cadence as the project is executing. And the teams have been doing fantastic job on sticking to that, and Sean for sort of masterminding that. So you know, this sort of a long process, right? You saw how they started with identifying the problem and they got to the project kickoff. It's a fairly long period of time. And I wanted to maybe open this up to hear from the project leaders about what were the key lessons learned as you went through this. So Joe, if I may start with you, could you maybe share some of your key lessons that you learned through this process?
Sure. I think for our team, we had a shorter project, 12 months. You know, every granting agency is a little different. Although this is from DOE, some of the paperwork has aspects of a foundation, but it's an institute through UCLA. And I think we need to be able to give our institutions, in our case, Penn State and MIT, more time than we thought to execute these contracts. And so I would just suggest to those of you, you know, preparing projects, don't be afraid to factor in those first couple months of your project to iron out that contract. And we often overlook that, and then it throws you into a tizzy based on your plan. So don't be afraid to have that in there, depending on the speed that you think your institute will respond. So, my thoughts.
Great. Niels, how about from your point of view?
So, you know, it's been a great project, and I would say that, first of all, innovation is fun. You know, it's really great to be able to work on things that are new and break down some barriers. They're also expensive and they're hard. We've learned as the project evolves, we we are learning. Learning happens. And the more we do, the more we understand about what we want to achieve. So a general recommendation is just be aware that things typically take longer than you expect. And another thing we've seen is we need to make sure that, or what we have done, keep the direction very clear, keep processes light, and focus on executing fast, focusing on getting software, because that's what we deliver, in the hands of the user quickly. That's when you get feedback and you see if we built something that is actually worthwhile using. And just as a conclusion, it's just great to be part of the CESMII community, have access to all the members, and work with the CESMII team.
How about you, Tatha, from a manufacturer standpoint?
Yeah, so I think I would mention mainly 2 points on the key lessons learned. The first one actually pertains to developing a detailed statement of work, that you have gone through, this whole process. We wrote the proposal, that's fine, but that's kind of high level stuff. But we also developed the detailed, statement of work. So while doing that exercise, it's like kind of virtually, doing the whole project in your head, just kind of developing the whole playbook before you actually do it. So that was kind of a good lessons for us to kind of reflect back on, what are the gaps, challenges, look at, old problems in a new perspective, a new way, and then find out, how we're going to solve those issues and who are the partners that we should kind of engage them, in doing so. The second aspect that I would touch upon would be, building a team. So when you're actually doing a lot of new stuff with, unproven technologies, or maybe some of the emerging technologies, that you plan to kind of use in your project, it's kind of uncertain sometimes as to who we should be kind of reaching out to internal, right? So I call it like, assembling birds of a feather. So, that activity that you have done, reaching out to other people in the plants, in R&D, finding out, the resources of people with the right set of skills that can actually contribute to our project, and more importantly, who kind of believe in this kind of methodologies, so that we have the buy-ins from people and they'll be able to support this project and see some success. So those are the 2 main points that I would say were kind of key lessons that we learned as part of this journey.
Great, great. Any words of wisdom from you, Mark?
Just a few. I will reiterate the fact that you have 4 administrative entities, at least in our case, and typically all of the programs here have somewhere around the same level. Allocate enough time for that to navigate that process, and I didn't, and I'm paying for it. So that is one thing I've learned next time. The other thing is look outside. There's lots of CESMII members, etc., lots of things that other people are doing, and there's always something to be learned by looking at what others are doing to see what can be taken and incorporated into what you're doing and maybe change your direction. There's always flexibility with the CESMII group here. You have allowed us to be flexible enough in our scope to make changes as we need to as we go along, and I do appreciate that.
Great, great. Well, thank you for that roundup on lessons learned. I think this is very helpful for us at CESMII to hear as well, and I'm sure that the audience is appreciating that too. So I guess we are at the point where we can take we can do a Q&A. I think there might be a few questions up on the chat room. I'm just going to quickly take a look here. Okay, how do all these 4 projects plan to transfer the knowledge from RFP projects back to CESMII so that the other members of CESMII can benefit from it? Any GitHub repositories or anything like that? So any one of you want to volunteer?
Yeah, Haresh, I think maybe I can, take a first shot at it. So in terms of, soft developments like, codes and softwares and stuff like that, we do have plans actually to have, those different repositories such as GitHub. So the work that we are doing with RPI, we have set up private, GitHub repositories to kind of, transfer the codes, to work on the same code, make, changes and stuff like that. But we plan to kind of open that up to the broader CESMII community at some point.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, so in addition to that, what we are doing, we are contributing to this CESMII Smart Manufacturing Innovation Platform, and that is becoming available to the members of CESMII so that they can actually look at what we're doing. And specifically, one of the deliverables in this project is the energy ontology or vocabulary that we are going to the CESMII property actually we're going to put it into the public domain, so that we have a common language that we can use for describing problems.
Haresh, I can also chime in.
Sure.
So ours being the sort of educational materials development, of course, these are going to be made available to CESMII members. I've got a lot of interest even internally from Penn State, and a few others have contacted me over the year. We are preparing repositories, both software for the project, and then some sort of learning system or just posting of videos and exercises and data. We are going to be working with CESMII on exactly how we want to do that. We have some ideas with our group. And all I'll say is the end of the summer is when they'll be made available. So we're working on kitting everything up now, and we'll have them available at the end of the summer.
Excellent.
Just one comment, Haresh, it's Mark here. The issue that we are looking at is our end result in here will be essentially a lessons learned for high temperature production processes. And we intend to provide the process in which you model, predict, use nonlinear observers and other mechanisms, including machine learning. We will be developing code that will be going in and be available in a variety of different formats that can be taken by the members, adjusted to their processes and used.
Good point. Well, thank you for responding to that. We have another question here. Discuss the extent to which the steel and cement projects are focused on CESMII infrastructure deployment. How extensively will the process data integration phase be addressed? So I guess
maybe, I can try to answer that question, maybe, Haresh.
Sure.
In terms of infrastructure deployment for our project, the steel project, we are actually deploying our own internal big data platform to integrate the process data, machine data, quality data, everything, so that we can actually start building models on top of those. So, so that's kind of the plumbing work. That's kind of necessary evil that somebody has to do before actually can get started with the models. So that's my few cents.
Related to the cement, one of our tasks towards the end of the project will be actual integration in a production system. And we will be using at least 30 days data on that to validate this process and model and refine it. And so we will have essentially a system that either works or doesn't work. That's why we call it research. But if it works as we anticipate, then it will be available for other manufacturers. And all they have to do is develop the analytical models, and then the process of taking the data and all of that will all be automated, hopefully, by going through the processes we develop.
Well, good. I'll add a little bit of color to that. If you have had the opportunity to watch the demonstration video that Jonathan Weiss, our VP of Technology, put out a week ago now, maybe more, is that one of the key elements in the platform is the concept of an SM profile, the Smart Manufacturing Profile. And that is essentially a structured manner in which information is represented for that particular asset or that particular process. And so one of the things that will happen in all of these projects is that as the projects come to a stage where they have come pretty close to solving the problem, they would have had to develop some of these information models in their own respective systems anyway. And we would be able to take those and then translate them into the SM profile to be essentially deposited back into our marketplace, right? So others can use it. That's one way to leverage the infrastructure that CESMII has. Another way is that there are, like Mark was pointing out, and some others have said that in their dialogue, is that as we develop some of these predictive technologies, the models, they would end up as applications in our platform, right? So we are also asking and working with the project team members to make sure that at the end of the project, there's some way in which we can capture that and make it part of the platform. Now, the flip side of this is that the platform in its current stage may or may not be ideal for you to actually execute your project, but we'll soon be there because we are making rapid progress on the platform. And for some of the upcoming projects, we'll actually be able to essentially tell them that, look here, there is a platform that you can use not only to feed back information into after you've completed the project, but also execute your project. And there are other flavors of projects that we have that'll do that. So just added some additional color to that. The last one here, at least on the list, is who owns the IP resulting from the project. I can start this, and if anybody else wants to chime in, please do. The CESMII's position is that the IP is owned by the project team. So, and it stays with them. And then for the purposes of testing and proof of concepts within the CESMII confines, it should be available free of cost for those members who want to try it within the platform constraints, as long as it is not used for production purposes. So all pre-production work, the proof of concept work, we would make that available. However, once you're past that, then it's an arrangement between the team that owns the IP and the team that wants to implement going forward. So I believe that was the last question on the Q&A. John Lee, do we have any chat room type of questions that have come through, or?
Not that I see here. No.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank the team here that's been wonderful in sharing their ideas. It's been a great dialogue. So thank you for participating, and thank you for the work that you and your teams are doing. It's obviously extremely important for the Institute to sort of execute on these projects. And being part of the first group of projects that the Institute did, you all hold a fairly important place in the story of CESMII. And so I want to thank you for that, and hopefully we can continue the partnership for many, many years to come. To the audience, please, hopefully this was something useful for you as you're looking at our upcoming RFPs, and as you want to engage with CESMII. Hopefully this was something useful for you. If you have any questions or comments following this webinar, please send them to us. Happy to engage in a conversation. So thank you for being here. And with that, we will end our session here, give you back 6 minutes of your Tuesday. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone. Great.
Bye.
Thank you.